Hey, good morning, good afternoon. I guess, Dave, for you, it is morning.
Good
It's
morning.
night for me. Welcome to NexgAI podcast. I'll introduce all of us. Before that, the broadcast name we are calling is Inflection. It's all about AI, business, and the truth in between. The discourse or the space of for honest discussion, and we want to discuss regarding real world impact on AI, not just technology trend, but the force that is shaping the business across the industry. The impact that will have to different businesses, the revenue growth model that we need to opt for, the business model that is going to change completely as AI will have a very large impact across not just business, but society and humanity in general. Coming to our guest, before I introduce guests, this is Priti Padhy. I'm the founder of NexgAI, and I have been working long enough in technology for 3 decades. We have been working in tech space for long enough. We'll always bring someone even more interesting and experienced individual like Dave. Dave Brown joins us, who has been working in industry for more than a couple of decades. He has been in the helm of changing, transforming very large organizations like Genpact and Accenture of the likes, and who has perhaps one of the pioneer of how BPOs were transitioned from older way to doing new way and now AI way. I may not do justice to your background, Dave. In the interest of time, I just gave a summary, but would you like to add anything about your experience before we start?
No, that's very good. I mean, in summary, 25 to 30 years in consulting and business process management for some of the biggest brands in the world across those providers you just mentioned. So happy to be here, and hopefully I can add some insight and interest through the conversation.
Brilliant. Given that you are now Chief Revenue Officer of Quantanite, you can talk about a little bit about your business, but how do you see this business model evolving for you and the impact of AI and how you're thinking in general? So take us to a 30,000 feet and even deeper if you need.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, quickly, Quantanite are a kind of BPO and tech-led BPO organization, and one of the reasons I joined was because of this inflection point that we're in here with the way Agentic AI can completely transform the way we think about how to do business, and more importantly, the outcomes that are derived on the back of that. And it's not the first time we've had a technology wave that has made a massive impact. If you think back to the 1990s and 2000s when the ERP wave came towards us, there's a massive change management angle to that wave, not just a technical wave. And I think we're in a similar place here where back then the ERPs, SAPs, PeopleSoft, et cetera, of the world were acknowledged of doing something good. And a lot of the effort we went to then was, how do we change processes? How do we educate people? How do we get them to onboard themselves onto this new way of working? And I think we're in a similar age here. It's just I don't think the selling message has quite got across yet to the people being impacted. And when I say impacted, I mean looking to implement and change the way their business works. They're not seeing it in the same way as they saw that big ERP wave. They're seeing it more of a people threat. I don't know what's behind the coding threat. Is there a existential crisis where the AI bots will take over threat? So it's an interesting, I think, mental dynamic between the 1990s, where there was that big wave, and what we're going through today. And it's really changed the way we think about our business, and I'm sure we'll talk about that as we go forward.
Yeah, I mean, do you seeing from your role perspective, like it is a completely beyond the business that you're dealing? It's like if we just hone on to your role, that also has changed, or you are restructuring that.
Yeah, as I said, our business is kind of historically been a data and contact center business. And obviously some of the use cases for Agentic AI being deployed has focused on those two areas to a great extent, right? So as a company, we have to change. And I think we've been on that curve for a couple of years, thinking about how do we change the way that contact center and similar services are provided to our customers, and how do we leapfrog, if you will, to the next paradigm, right? So I don't want to be in a people business. I want to be in an outcome business. And the way to drive outcomes for customers is to the right judicious deployment of technology. And that may be agentic AI, it may be something else, but changing the way our customers and their customers interact together. And ideally, let's say I'm 100% people business today. I think within a very short order of time, and we are putting these proposals together today for clients, we move to a 80% technology solution and 20% people business, right? On the outcomes. So our message to the market, our need to have a 360 view of how that will work, the combination of people and technology is super important. And so we've changed our go-to-market dramatically. We changed types of companies we want to talk to as well. We need technology forward-thinking companies to drive this wave, right? The cycle of adoption is challenging for those companies and those people that are not accepting that this is a new wave that will have a major impact. So to get the traction, people like you and us and other providers in this space need forward-thinking people to work with.
Thank you.
Delivery model, right? So the services were in the UK, and so we sent an accounts payable service to Bangalore with about, I think it was 10 people or thereabouts in those times. So that was the first wave of how do we get, cost arbitrage, right? So I've lived that whole journey from that very small beginning to where we are today. There is a fixation within our broader customer base on times, efficiency metrics. How many people am I managing, right? And then even our customers we have to go through this large transformation where they're used to running teams of hundreds of people and not really thinking about what's the broad impact on my business other than, am I answering the phone, within 30 seconds? Am I getting people off the phone within 5 minutes? And so on. That mentality certainly will have to change, right? So we as an organization, and I think more broadly, this is where the industry's going, want to commit to outcomes with our customers, right? So let's say that the cost of a customer through a year is, I don't know, let's say £25, right? For a particular company. We are looking to find customers who are willing to go on a journey with us and say, actually, in 2 years, that cost of customer for whatever interaction model you have with them is going to be £5, right? How do you do that? You don't do that with people. You do that with the right technology deployment. Right. So, and we as an organization, and I think the industry needs to go to a point where we will commit to those outcomes because we are so sure that the way that agentic AI and other technologies have developed and the way that the end customers in businesses of those businesses are willing to adopt and sign up to technology as a way of interfacing with a company, it's entirely possible. And so we're very confident that we can lock in on those types of outcome metrics and deliver them and make money at it as well, right? So that hopefully will drive, NPS, so customer satisfaction up. It'll drive revenue growth for those companies. It'll actually drive costs down as well. So I think we as organizationally, and I think as an industry, will start to commit to those outcomes and therefore worry less about how long it takes to handle something or even the mechanism of handling it within our business. Yeah. So what is it that I do within my business process? And that's not limited to contact centers. Let's take the whole value chain of a business, right? Mm-hmm. So order to activation or how I run my finance department. How am I driving revenue through insight for my business? So by way of example, every company has so much insight from their customers, right? Sitting within their data pools, right? So for us, for example, if we receive, let's say, 500,000 calls for a particular customer, and they're all sitting in audio files in our business, people are looking at 2% of those just because they're trying to quality check the agent running or doing that call. Well, now we don't need to worry about 2%. We can look at all 100% of those calls. We can therefore analyze what's happening in those calls. We can look at where's the revenue leakage? Why is this customer calling me? And what is my lost revenue as a result of him calling me? It's usually a defect. I had a customer recently say to me, every time somebody calls in, if it's not a sales type environment, it's a defect contact. So, where is my order? I've got to change my bank details and I can't do it very easily. That's all friction, right? So within that, so therefore, let's try and remove all those contact points. But for those that we do, let's make sure we understand why they're calling and feed that in a closed loop system back into the revenue generating business or the IT guys or the marketing guys to say, hey, upstream, you've got order issue problems. You've got stockouts in a certain warehouse, or the guys that are knocking on the door to install a floor are not professional enough and therefore they're losing customers. So all that insight sits within the business. And I think it's our job and it's those leaders to understand those and therefore to be able to drive revenue and cost efficiency for their businesses. It's been too long. It's been manage your cost base, manage your people. The expectation levels have to go higher now, I think, because there's no excuses with the ability to use technology to drive those insights. As we deploy more AI to those business processes, and let's just make sure that listeners to this podcast understand what I mean by that, we'll move from 100% humans to, for a certain workload, for a certain, let's say, well, just a certain workload, 80% of that will then now be done by Agentic AI. So we need to make sure that the responses and the solutions being offered by Agentic AI to those end customers are appropriate, accurate, the right tone of voice for that particular brand and or end customer, and that there's a mechanism for ensuring that quality, right? So our people, and indeed anybody's organization's human workforce, will move from a finger on a keyboard translating data from reviewing or taking phone calls themselves or writing emails in response to customer questions to reviewing the quality of the output of the AI solutions. So that means within the AI, we've got to build the guardrails upon which they operate. So what is my returns policy? If I'm in a collections environment, rather than me, the human, doing, hours of work to understand the customer I'm going to call to try and collect cash, well, the AI will do all that work for me. It'll create a history of payment patterns, who's at risk of paying, and then a script that I should use when I call that customer. The human then needs to look at that and go, actually, yep, all that data makes sense. Although that script makes sense, I can now make that call either through Agentic AI or as a human. So our role will become to more hands on the steering wheel of quality, ensuring that the governance that's been inbuilt to the AI is working as appropriate. And if not, then we feed it back into the training loop such that the outcome is relevant. So my role as a provider of those services needs to ensure that the AI that I'm deploying for my customer has all those guardrails, has that training loop, and that the people I employ now operate at a very different level. They operate at the guide, the analyzer, the governance control of that business. So yes, it's a what is my true revenue outcome, my true cost of customer management, through to the quality angles that are inbuilt into the AI solutions. I think that's an interesting challenge for companies that are looking to work with external providers, right? Because the control and compliance will always rest with the customer, right? With the company, right? So that division of accountability is a very interesting, where do you draw the line and how much accountability do you accept? How much accountability do you sign up for, commercially and liability wise? So I don't think we've got an answer as an industry right now, and I don't think companies will relinquish that easily, but it's definitely a discussion we need to be having.
Do you see from your experience that you had like many roles you could not able to transition into because you always needed a set of group of people that you had to do it? Now, suddenly, many of those scenarios will be up for AI and autonomous execution almost. Hence, and what are those kind of areas you think is really up for Agentic AI? Is because we see from NexgAI perspective, almost level 1 to level 5 can be autonomous, but that's us being technologists and strategists, we think that we should... Every company should be level 5 and it's like a driverless car. But how do you think about that?
So I'm an early adopter of technology generally, right? So I'm more biased towards your way of thinking than the other end of the spectrum. But clearly companies have to learn and go on that journey together, right? So I think the biggest issue for the industry is that of incrementalism, right? So if you imagine, I worked with a company previously and I was doing some IT consulting, right? One of them was looking at their kind of hardware software within their business. They had 2,500 SaaS applications within their business, and they were themselves a SaaS provider, right? So and that's because it's been incrementalism of, I need something that does this small piece. And so I'm going to buy a new SaaS software that deals with that small piece. And then you've got the whole problem of, well, you've got a spaghetti of how those things talk to each other, or often, or almost always, never talking to each other, right? So the industry's got an incrementalism problem. And if you think about who buys the agentic AI, at the moment, it's still within the IT organization, and it's not overtly led by the business organization, which I think it needs to be if we're thinking outcomes, right? So that's the biggest challenge I see. So therefore, how do you get around that? And I'm of the belief that if you had a blank piece of paper, how would you design your business today? So let's not worry about the fact we've got, 500 people doing collections in a utility in the UK or in the US. Let's worry about the fact we need to get cash from the customer. And how do we do that? And I think forward-thinking leaders in finance, in IT, in the collection center or the contact center need to think that way, right? And it's going to be a very hard change journey. And that again, I think is one of the biggest challenges we have as industry, is the change management curve and worrying about, well, what do I do with my 400 people if agentic AI solve that problem? So take collections. Yeah, why am I not getting a proactive reminder that my bill is due on Thursday? Or why am I not getting an agentic AI phone call saying, hey, I know you've been defaulting a little bit recently. Is there a problem with your business? Let's talk about it and have a negotiation, right? So that proactive nature. So I think there's a need for senior leaders to do some bottom up evaluation of what their business outcome is and how do I best use the technology that's suddenly become available to us. And you know better than me, but in the last 12 months, it's been transformed on the way we can do business today. So that I think is the key foundational question I ask my clients. If we were starting again, how would we do this?
Every workflow could be a conversation. And if that's the case, can you just say in one sentence all the workflow that you ever had and generatively execute that?
At an enterprise level, there's nothing that's not off the table.
Yes.
In my view. Why would it be? The humans are in the messy middle. Well, how do we remove the messy middle?
Agreed.
Yeah. I mean, the industry is thinking about it and we've done a lot of deep thinking about it. I know one of the things I think I heard last year, and I think it's a truism, is that AI will not take the jobs of the people. The people who use AI will take the jobs of the people, right? So therefore, we're looking for people that are curious about how their job can evolve, right? And it won't be for everybody, right? I think the younger generation today needs to accept the fact that AI and other technologies will change is changing the way jobs are done today. And you can see that through the recruitment strategies of some of the big consulting organizations, right? So we think about the need to have an up-leveled, upskilled organization, right? And not everybody will survive. Right. And for our business, we don't want to reduce our headcount. We want to grow our headcount. We want to increase our headcount incrementally compared to the scope and scale of the business that we'll take on compared to what we might have done before. We will always need the human in the loop, as we've discussed. But those people need to be upskilled and trained on those finer human skills that will be required. So how do you manage the governance of the technology? How do you manage because you're now going to start dealing with only the truly escalated, high sensitive customer touchpoints, right? Which requires a different type of individual. It's not hey, I need to update my credit card details, or hey, can I schedule my flooring installation? It's going to be, my floor installation went really badly wrong. I want a refund. I want to talk to a CEO about how bad your company is. Those kind of skills are super difficult to get hold of and to train, right? And it requires some level of empathy and so on. So the whole mix And we're recruiting right now for a customer. And if you imagine a baseline of 100, well, only 60 of those will survive in the 2B. The remaining 40 are a higher level skill set, right? And that's a journey to go on with the customer as well, because there's a cost associated with such a thing. So the mix will change for sure. The other point you made, I think, is really interesting is I think it talks to knowledge loss, right? So the more you have AI within your business, then there'll be less knowledge within the retained organization on how that actually works. So we have to have a thesis around how do we keep that education. Now, obviously the AI will know, and our documentation around the AI will demonstrate that, but that has to be available to people so they know exactly what's happening in their business. So that I think is an untapped channel we need to think about as well.
True. And how do we tap that? And there's a cross-pollination between the agents and human agency. That's what you're referring to.
Yeah. And so I think I mentioned it earlier on, but we've got some AI technology that listens to all calls, right? We've listened to it. The AI has interpreted it. We now know that, and the AI is interpreting that. So that's now available to us. It was never there before. So for the people that we have in those teams, we have to, the first amongst equals principle, where, Priti exhibits these behaviors, which exhibits an outcome. And so we can then help to train other people in our team to elevate themselves, right? So we've got real world examples, not just theoretical, lab training courses. So it becomes a daily training. So the way we are working, we're analyzing all of that. When you come into work this morning, we go, hey, you did amazing in these 10 things. Here's one thing that you could change, would drive a different behavior from the customer. And so that real-time feedback loop, rather than waiting for your annual appraisal or your 2% of your calls to be listened to by a QA team of humans, it's a much more immediate impact and hopefully driving quality much quicker for our customers.
Potentially doing a very large amount of the total addressable market for AI, right? If you think of all services done by the BPOs for every particular work processes, and you still believe there is a human in the loop, which even if it is small or it may be very high value and small quantity, call me out few of those kind of fundamental things which you guys have thought through as a company or as an industry as it is shaping.
I would start with customer-centric thinking. So segmentation of society, whether that's in healthcare or in a CPG company or what have you. We're nascent in the development and deployment of this technology in the interaction models. We've seen it with the way some countries are banning, juniors or under 16s using social media, right? So we have to, as a business, think about how do you segment the end users of your services and what's the best interaction model for them, right? My father, 80-year-old this year, is not going to use his phone to interact with somebody through a chatbot or through Agentic AI solutions. He won't even want to talk to somebody on the phone, quite frankly, but that will be his only and most relaxed route to do anything, right? So you're never going to get away from certain demographics or stratification of people from the human connection, and neither should you. So that, I think, is probably a truism for any industry that we're in. The most obvious of those is I truly hope that AI has the biggest impact in healthcare, right? Nothing to do with my business. But if the promises that we are exposed to come true, then AI in healthcare will have a massive impact on longevity of life and quality of life. But you're never going to get away from having a doctor, sitting by your bedside telling you what the implications are. You'll get your results much quicker, and you'll therefore have your treatment deployed much quicker than you would have done in the past. But you won't get away from, and neither should you, from that human exposure. It comes down to how you want to interact with your customers and how you want to drive your business revenue growth, I think. When it comes to middle, enterprise back office that doesn't touch a customer, well, as little human in the loop as possible, I think, is the answer. Just comes back to that governance point that we talked about earlier. Right, 10, 20-year journey, isn't it? I mean, it's not going to happen overnight. The technology is there, right? But the adoption curve is the challenge. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you think about it, our contact center is in the value chain at the top end of the. I mean, we are talking to the customers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We can't go much higher. In fact, our challenge is perhaps going the other direction, because the agentic AI solutions that we have at our fingertips as a company enable us to impact the enterprise, not just the customer contact center area that we came from, right? So that's our challenge, is to be slightly more pervasive, maybe looking backwards a little bit, and doing it in the right domains and in the right industry, right? So, we don't want to be working in the healthcare industry because we have no domain knowledge in that area, right? It's not one of our target industries. Doesn't mean we won't in the future, but at the moment, I think we've got to double down on what we know, and then through that vertical of customer experience, and then look to how do we then apply that capability to the broader enterprise and become the glue for them in that regard.
Looks like we are moving towards kind of an operational singularity. It's kind of set in, coming to kind of honing on you, your role as a sales leader and a growth kind of champion.
Yeah. So I'm of the firm opinion if companies like ourselves don't adopt and embed this capability into our business, we will die, right? There is no future in the old BPO model, right? It's very clear. And neither should there be a future in that business. So we've taken a very simple strategic approach that we're building capability internally, as we should do. But also we're partnering with people like you to make sure that we bring the best of breed organizations to the industry, right? We will never be competitive just by building our own technology, because we don't have the access to the brightest minds in the market, right? We will never do that because our brand won't be sufficient to do so. They will be sitting with those big, bright brands that we see in the market today. So therefore, strategy is our approach, and partnering in the right way. And importantly, partnering with people who are really nimble, right? At the moment, it's a very nimble industry, right? Customers are turning their mindset to it, and we have to be on their front door when they're ready to talk, and be ready to go back to them within a few days. So our go-to-market strategy is to be nimble and to be really putting something in front of them that they won't have seen before, right? And we can only do that by partnering with yourselves. So that's super important. I think if you're going to try and build it yourself, if you're a CRO or a chief growth officer and you own the product line within your business, if you're going to try and build it yourself, it's going to take a long time, and you will have missed the market, I suspect, by the time you've built something that's relevant to the industry, which is why we've taken a deliberate approach another way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is also a bit of an art and science, right? So you need to surround with all of the possibility of technology, but also the right kind of people, those who can help you to grow. As a role, it needs to drive you are in the forefront of growth, right? Otherwise, you need to bring the money to your business. And I think this technology can really, really help you to do that. And you have seen our results. So we see firsthand how this can impact your role or any other industry CRO role as such.
Yeah, and I think the learning I've had Priti over the last 12 months is that we started off with a one product, if you will, inverted commas. But actually, what's most important is that we can react to the customer use case that they put in front of us, and it could be multimodal, right, in all kinds of fashions. And having the ability, because of the technology layer and the agentic solutions that we have together, enables many more conversations than if I'd just gone with, hey, I've got a voice bot that works for you. So anyway, which is what the SaaS model really is. So I think that's very important for us. Yeah. There are those very, very large providers who have had a traditional bums on seat model, who are going to be not destroyed, but their revenue is at risk, right? If they don't replace it with an outcome-based model, right? within 3 years. If they don't do that, then they're going to lose headcount over headcount, and that's going to damage their revenue. For us, we're in the slightly envious position in that we are smaller, we are more nimble. We've been deploying technology like this for a couple of years at least, and so we are to some extent isolated from that challenge. Our challenge is getting the exponential growth with the combination of human and AI. Because we are small, our brand is not as recognizable, and nobody ever got fired for signing a contract with a big, traditional outsourcing consultant. And they might do if they signed up with a smaller company like ourselves. So that's my biggest growth challenge is recognition and confidence, despite being a slightly smaller award-winning organization. So I think it's twofold: those that are small and nimble, who aren't encumbered by thousands of people, just through a bundle seat type contract, will thrive. Those that are in that encumbered state will have a challenge, or are having challenges. I think those companies, if you think about your P&L as a provider in two ways, one tech-led revenue and one people-led revenue, that mix is going to change. And so for some companies, that survival mode might be good enough. There's definitely growth there if people come with that go-to-market of the mix of those two things and having a very relevant set of skills. So yes, there's definitely growth there. But people like yourselves, will benefit across that whole estate because of the mix change towards a tech-led environment.
Yeah. Dave, it has been incredibly interesting discourse. Which are the roles from a BPO organization perspective still continue to will be very, very valuable. Thank you so much for giving your time and insights. Looking forward to continue to have the discourse.
Yeah, my pleasure, Priti, and it's been very good, very interesting conversation. And hopefully your listeners get something out of it. So thank you. Thank you, guys.